Whether it's a small dinner or a big holiday gathering, you really can't go wrong with apple pie. Now this one has a crumb topping and it's drizzled with caramel sauce at the end, so it pretty much takes apple pie to a new level. Now I'm making the crust for the pie. I started with 3 cups of all-purpose flour. I used a 1.5 cup measure. They're so handy. And I'll add a teaspoon of ground cinnamon, half a teaspoon of ground nutmeg, and then a teaspoon of salt. This is the pie crust recipe that my friend Sylvia shared with me years and years ago. I added the spices just to give the apple pie a little bit of an edge. I got all that stirred around. Now I'll add 3/4 of a cup of cold shortening. I just cut it into squares. And then the same amount of cold butter. Now I'll just use a pastry cutter to slowly combine the dry ingredients with the shortening and butter. I got most of the big chunks of shortening and butter broken up. So now I'll add a beaten egg. I didn't overbeat it, I just barely stirred it around with a fork. Now I have a little container of ice water, and I'll just add about 5 tablespoons right over the top. Whenever you're making pie crust, it's important for the ingredients to stay really, really cold. Otherwise, everything falls apart. Now finally, a tablespoon of vinegar. The acid in the vinegar just helps the pie crust stay extra tender. Now I'll just stir it around with a spoon until it just comes together. Now I'll just break the dough in half, and then I'll put each helping into its own plastic bag. I'll just form it into a rough ball. And then after I stick it in the bag, I just flatten it slightly, and that'll make it easier to roll out later. Okay, I'll get the second one in. This pie crust is so good without the spices, but it's particularly delicious with. All right, now I'm gonna stick the pie crust into the freezer. This crust is for a future pie, and this one just needs to chill for about 20 minutes. So when the time's up, all I have to do is get the dough out of the bag and onto a floured surface and start rolling. I just keep going until it's slightly larger than the pie pan. Then I roll it around the rolling pin, lift it onto the pie pan, carefully unroll it, and press it in. Then I tear off the excess dough and tuck the edge under neatly and go around pinching the dough to crimp it. I've just been slicing a bunch of peeled apples. I've got about 6 to 7 cups of apple slices in the bowl. And now I'll add 1/2 cup of sugar. And then to make it a little bit thicker, I'll add 1/4 cup of flour. To combat all that sweetness, it needs a little salt, about 1/4 teaspoon. And then I'll slice a lemon in half, and I'll just squeeze in the juice of 1/2 of it. That is all combined. Now I'll just bring up the beautiful crust, and I'll just pile the apples right in the crust. And when I say pile, I mean pile. I don't believe in having a level apple pie. Okay, just perfect. Now, there are many delicious things about this apple pie, and this crumb topping is one of them. It's butter and flour cut together with some brown sugar, quick oats, which give fabulous texture, and a little salt, all stirred together. Okay, now the crumb topping just gets sprinkled all over the pie. Use my hands. If some of it falls onto the floor, no problem. There's plenty more where that came from. Big pile. Now I'll just use my hands to let it fall into the cracks. Oh my gosh, look at that. Gorgeous. Now the pie goes into a 375-degree oven for about an hour. Then there's another thing to add to the topping before it finishes baking. 1/2 cup of chopped pecans. Delicious. Okay, back in for 5 more minutes. Well, my house smells heavenly, and that means the pie is ready to come out of the oven. It just looks amazing. Oh, nice and golden, those crunchy nuts on top. The crust looks gorgeous. Now to finish it off and to make it caramel apple pie, I'll just crack open a jar of caramel sauce and I'll just drizzle it all over the pie. My gosh, that looks so good.